This video is part 4 out of 6 that shows the whole process of making a dress. In this video, I am inserting the invisible zipper. Okay, we're sewing the invisible zipper onto the dress now. This is the outside of the invisible zipper, and you can see that there's no coil showing there, and that's because it will end up hidden at the end. But to sew it on, to get as close as possible, we actually want to iron it so that it's flattened like that. So I'm going to put it on the ironing board and turn it upside down, put a lowish heat, and then iron it flat like that. It won't stay very well, but that doesn't matter. I'm not trying to get it to stay, I'm just trying to get it so that when I sew it, it's easier to get it to go flat like that. So turn the iron down a little bit, and I'll just give it a moment to cool. Okay, so that's done. See how it still turns back, but it just will go that way a bit more easily when I'm actually sewing. Okay, mostly when you do zippers, you have the seam with a centered zipper. You would sew the seam first up until where the zipper goes in, and then you would sew that together. But for invisible zippers, you put the zipper in first and then sew the rest of the seam. So I have overlocked the edges so that I don't have to worry about them later, and I haven't sewn the seam together. There are usually instructions on your invisible zipper tag, so they're pretty useful. You can hold on to those in case you need them. I like to, because it sort of feels a bit complicated which side goes on where when you're sewing it. So I quite like to sit the zipper in place first and make sure that it's the way I want it. So this is the right side out, and this is the right side up for the zipper. So that means that once I fold this under, this side's going to go on here. So there's the top of it, so the zipper goes up to, let's do it up. I actually want it to end up quite high. So the zipper, if we put it on there, there's where the back ends and the lining starts. And so I'll just fold that over and pop one pin in, and then I'll undo it ready to sew. Undo the zipper, ready to sew. Okay. Now I don't have a invisible zipper foot for the machine I was using before, so I've just swapped machines for this. This is an invisible zipper foot, and the big advantage of it is it's got grooves on the back that the zipper fits in, helping you to sew very, very close to the zipper. You can, as well as these metal ones, you can get little plastic ones, and I've had one of these for many years that I've used a lot too. So now I've got the invisible zipper put on. Okay, so I've got my zipper here. I'm not going to sew that top bit, obviously, because that's in the lining. That's where the top of the dress is, but I don't want my zipper starting all the way down here, so I'll just cut that off later. So we pop that under, and because I've left quite a big seam allowance, I'm going to put this in a little bit from the edge. But you can put the side of the zipper tape right on the very edge of the fabric. I just wasn't sure what sort of zipper I was going to do when I was cutting it out, so I left a big seam allowance. Now we want the groove in this side, we want to be stitching on the right of the zipper, so we're going to put the zipper teeth underneath the left hand channel on the foot, and I want the stitching to start right near the very top of the outside of my dress. So I may actually fold it down and leave it there. We line this up, get it into position, and you can start. That had the lock stitch at the beginning. If you don't have that automatic, make sure you do forward, backward, forward so it doesn't come undone. Keep this straight. I've got it lined up with one of the lines of overlocker stitching. And because of the but you could line it up with the side of your fabric depending on what your seam allowance is. Now I like to have a zipper, especially with invisible zippers, that's got a little bit of extra length there, so that I'll cut that off later. Okay, so the first side is done, and you can see when I turn that round it's going to be invisible. Because I've got this seam here that I need to match up, and I want to match up exactly where they end, I'm going to take this back to the table and line everything up and make a few markings to do the second side. The most difficult thing about the invisible zipper on a dress that's got a join at the waist is lining that up and getting that perfect. So this is where we have to be pretty careful. Okay, so I've laid this out neatly and I've done up the zip. So you can see it's hidden on that side. This is how I want it to end up, obviously, with that lined up. So more important than the top or the bottom of the zip is this seam here. Put a dot there, but I feel like the even if I use a sharp edge of this, it's not going to be sharp enough. So I might put a pin. And I will make because when I sew this, the zip's going to be undone, so I won't have any idea where the where this seam is. What I've done, just to be extra safe, is put a pin where the bottom seam is and a pin where my top stitching is. So there's the two of them side by side. Now let's look at the top. And I'm going to think about what I want to use to line up the top. Maybe I'll get you a bit closer in. If I put this, fold it over for a seam allowance and put it lined up here, I think what I would like to line up is the actual top of the zipper tape. So if those are matched like that, then the top of the zipper tape will be on the lining, but it's just going to be the most obvious thing to match up. Okay, so that's got the pin in it on here. And then the final thing that we want is we want to know exactly where to end, where to put our last stitch down the bottom, because that will have a neater end if they both end at exactly the same place, and if you don't do that you have to go back and add a few stitches. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop sewing. Oh, the other thing I might do actually is mark the very top seam. If this was a lighter coloured zip, I would use a disappearing pen there, because I can do a very fine line with that, but it just won't show up on the black. So if we put that together, then the very top seam will be right where that pin is. Okay. So now we need to make sure that we don't put an extra twist in this or get this the wrong way around. When I finish, the zipper is going to be facing that way up. This seam will end up folded over because there's a seam allowance. And so I can just pop a pin in anywhere to hold it the right way. And then I can open it all up and line it up. Okay. So obviously this isn't lined up yet. So let's just start with this. Absolutely line up those pins. And this is lining up nicely. So we're going to start sewing here and go up and then there and go down, and then I have less concern as to whether everything's lined up properly before I start. Okay, now we just need to sew the rest of this seam before we do anything else. So we're going to line this all up. And then pull this out and put these two seams together. And then we'll add a couple of pins. We'll add a pin just to the side here. and then a pin just below it. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing beside the seam where we're going to start sewing. The zipper ends here, the zipper stitching. We're going to start sewing probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of a centimetre above that, just to the left of it. We can't sew on top of the line because that's attached to the zipper, so we just have to get as close as we can. And then we'll continue down. I have switched to a regular zipper foot, and so I need to move my needle. In the case of this foot, sometimes you move the foot, sometimes you move the needle. I need to move my needle all the way to the right so that it doesn't actually hit the zipper foot. So I've done that. And let's see how close we can get this and how neat we can get the finish. Now put it under, and then I will give the zipper a little tug to get it well out of the way. And if I line up my foot, the zipper foot, I can do that, right against I can feel the zipper teeth there, then that will give me stitching that's very close. What you use to line up will depend on your own, what your style of zipper foot your machine has. So we'll start here. And we'll just make sure that we're staying close. And I'll sew down a little way, but then it will actually be easier to do the rest of it with a normal foot on. And they're very, very easy to change, so you might as well. So we'll take this one off. And pop this one back on. Check that this is neat from the front. Yep. So now we'll just continue down to sew the rest of this seam. And what I'll do is when I'm lining this up, I'll put the foot on the work out what's going to work to line it up the best. Make this overlap. I'm going to use the middle line there, so I'll move the foot back to the middle, the needle back to the middle, keep this lined up, and then good to go. Okay, that's done. Now we need to sew the lining onto the zipper, which is very easy. Okay, here's the top of my dress. It's inside out. There's the zipper. I've undone the zipper. See this top section here? Instead of cutting it off close, I would stitch that bit down on each side before sewing the lining on. Stitch that bit down on each side because that will be a lot neater up the top. I actually ended up, because I had trimmed off most of the top, I ended up hand stitching just that little tiny section down. What we need to do now is sew the lining onto this side of the zipper. So I start with it like this, and then we need to turn this part of the dress so that it's inside out. I'm going to carefully fold the top, which I've trimmed. I've also overlocked the bottom of that. You don't really have to overlock that because it will all be inside later. And then you're going to sew down there in the seam allowance of the tape. So back a little bit. I'm going to use a normal zipper foot for that. And then the one thing that I will do is I will fold this bottom bit up to make it easier to sew that onto there later on, so that it matches up. So I'll pop a pin in here, and I'm making sure that I don't, let's try to get this close. I'm making sure that this is folded like that, so that there's not going to be any of that seam showing. Like that. I'd rather it pull slightly to the inside than slightly to the outside. I'll pop a pin in there just to hold that ready to start so I know what I'm sewing. And when I get down to here, I'll put a pin as a marker. I will just fold this up. Doesn't matter if it's, you won't see this from the outside. So if it's slightly longer or shorter, it's not actually a big problem, but it'd be nice if it lines up perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to put on a zipper foot and sew that down, and then I have to do the same to the other end, so I might as well line that up now. So it starts like that. Turn it inside because we want to right sides together. Sorry. Starts like that. That's the right side there. Fold the lining over so that it's right sides together. Line up the top nicely so that none of that seam can possibly show up the top. Pop a pin because I'm going to follow from that side, and then I will put a pin here to make sure I know where that seam is when I come to it. Okay, zipper foot on to sew this. It's not, I'm not trying to get it as close as the outside, I just want it to end up somewhere there. I've turned this one over, so I'm sewing it from the right side. This is the piece that's not attached, and this is where the zip is. And part of that's because I like to have the fabric over here, and I think it will be too awkward otherwise. But also I think it will be easier to get it nice and neat because I can see the line of stitching for the zipper. So let's start right near the top, forward. And I can just keep on lining up the lining with the edge here. I could have pinned all of this first. Okay, time to fold this up. So I could have just left that last bit open if that's easier, and hand stitched that when I was stitching all of the lining down. But I've just done a little. Okay, so let's have a look at that. The other thing we need to do before, which we might as well do now while I'm just at the machine, is we sew the sides of the zipper here onto the seam allowance to keep this neat. So let's do that. And obviously if there's no lining, you could have done this earlier. Going to pop a few little stitches. I probably could have done this before, but I think I want a few stitches just going across here, across the end of the zipper really slowly so I don't break my needle, just as an extra measure to make sure. Oh, it's going to end. Just to make sure that I could have just done reverse across there, but instead I'll just go back and sew it again. Just to make sure that the zipper never goes past there. Now we'll sew this side on. And you can trim off a bit of the zipper if you like. I don't have a huge amount here this time, so I'm just leaving it for now. Also because mine is in a gathered skirt, so it's not going to be tight against my body, it's not going to have a lump, anything like that. So it's really, I might as well leave that end. Clip, clip. Okay, so this is all done. Once that's ironed, that will look even smoother. Up the top here, everything matches up, and here's the inside with the lining. Look how nice that is.